We are live. What's going on? I smacked the mic out of my hand. What's going on, Mr. Todd?
Yo, my man, Mr. Phil. Yo, how you making out in this heat? You know, look, listen, I'm tropical, so I'm all right. But my fair friend over there, any blisters, boils, or skin falling off?
Nah, man, you can see that my skin is not very fair at all. And I do very well in the I'm Mediterranean, my brother. So I do well in the sun. I get dark. I probably get as almost. Last time I was at the equator, I almost got as dark as you. What do you think about that?
Hey, hey, keep it going.
Right on. All right, guys, welcome back. Late Night Green interview edition. We've got a good one for you tonight, and we are going to learn something. We often do learn something, but tonight I'm excited about it. I had an opportunity to have a pre-conversation with our guest, and yeah, it's pretty exciting. I'm ready to let it go, baby.
Ready to dive deep?
Yeah, we're going to dive deep, and this is someone who's well deep in the cannabis industry. And without further ado, let me introduce Hirsh Jain. He is the founder of Ananda Strategy. Did I get that right? Hirsh, pop him up. There you are. Let's go. Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We are doing good, and we're doing even better now that you're here. So welcome to the show, Hirsh.
Phil, Todd, thank you so much for having me.
We're excited.
Let's see, you got the coolest shirt on the show.
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty we could talk about when it comes to the DEA. We'd love to break that down with you guys.
It doesn't say abolish ICE, so we're okay. We're okay. We're not gonna trade shots across the table. But yeah, I do love that shirt, and hopefully there's a spot where you can promote that and people can they can get their hands on one of those. They're pretty cool. I want one.
Sure.
So Hirsh, again, thank you for joining us. We're super excited to have you. And tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to get to learn who you are. Love to touch a little bit on your history, how you even got involved in this space, because I think in our earlier conversation, we kind of started, I'm like, oh, don't tell me anymore. This is good. And then we'll talk a little bit about the state of the regulation across both, Europe and the States here, and we'll kind of pick it apart and get your expertise on the matter.
That sounds great. I mean, I'm excited to have that conversation with you guys. But before that, I just want to say I really admire the platform that you guys have put together, and I've been watching sort of your content for almost a year now, right? Even before last year's election, and the way that you've broken down the legislative dynamics in Pennsylvania have been fascinating to me. So it's great to be on, and I appreciate a lot of what I've learned through watching you guys.
Well, that's, I don't even know what to say about that. We certainly appreciate it. And just so the viewers know, and I came across Hirsh because he interacted with our content on X. And so I've been able to read more about what he writes. He sees what we do. And so when the request came out, I knew I had a feeling it was a really good fit. And according to what we're hearing, it's a good fit.
It's a nice organic meeting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
so
right.
that's the purpose of social media, right? Yeah. This is what it's supposed to equate to.
Totally. 100%.
Absolutely. So Hirsh, why don't you tell us about your background? Where'd you grow up, and maybe how you got involved with cannabis?
Totally. Yeah, I'll give you maybe the 1 or 2 minute version, but I mean, you tell me where you want to.
No, please. We want to know who you are.
Yeah. Well, above all, I'm a Californian, first and foremost. My parents were born in India, but they immigrated to the United States in the 70s, and they bounced around, the U.S. for a decade. But I was born and raised in California, in the Bay Area. And so that's a big part of my background. And like a lot of people from California, cannabis was always a big part of my life. So I started using cannabis early, probably earlier than I should have when I was in high school. And, obviously that's a little young to be using cannabis. I'm not suggesting kids should, but it really opened up my world in a lot of ways. It got me interested in literature and philosophy. It improved my musical taste. It got me really into running, and so, a lot of the things that I was taught about cannabis, I realized were a lie. And so it really enhanced my life, I would say, spiritually, intellectually, even athletically, which is funny because now we're sort of having a conversation about athletics and cannabis. But, a couple decades ago, it was considered kind of strange to exercise and consume cannabis. So cannabis was a big part of my life. It was the foundation of a lot of my friendships in high school. But at the end of high school, about a week before I graduated, I actually got arrested for cannabis at my high school prom. And that was a really sort of
Not the prom.
No.
Come on, that's the wrong night.
That's
Yeah,
not, that's not right. God damn.
it was a bummer. Yeah, it was right outside the Black Cat in San Francisco. It's crazy. Kamala Harris was the DA at the right. This is 20 years ago, and so I won't go into the whole story, but it was a pretty traumatizing sort of incident. Luckily, because I was a minor and I was under 18, I escaped probably the worst of it, but I got suspended from school. There was questions about whether I'd be able to graduate on time and whether I would, I'd gotten accepted to Berkeley for college, but that was sort of at risk. But, after going through some drug counseling and other things like that, which were kind of silly, ultimately I saw my way through, graduated from high school. And long story short, when I got to UC Berkeley, that sort of animated my interest in cannabis advocacy issues. So I joined the Berkeley Public Defender's Office as the cannabis lead at UC Berkeley. And so that would mean, I defended students that were accused of cannabis violations by the university. And not to date myself, but back when I was in college, which was, more than a couple decades ago now, even in California, even a smaller amount of cannabis could mean that your financial aid could be revoked or you could be kicked out of school. So I did that for 4 years in college, which was really meaningful to me. And then after that, that made me want to get a law degree. So right after Berkeley, I went to Harvard for law school and, worked on a lot of criminal justice issues there and focused a lot of my work on the war on drugs. Again, not to get too long-winded, but I had the chance to study under a lot of great race and criminal justice scholars. I got to write a paper about the racially disparate impacts of the war on drugs. And so that was really interesting to me intellectually. And then just, sort of fast forwarding to the present day, I've worked in the cannabis space now for 8 years. And it's interesting, when I was, in school, I never really anticipated that it would be a career, but I was watching the legalization movement with great interest and great attention. And I was actually working in San Francisco at Airbnb on their policy team, helping legalize that in cities and states and countries around the world. And when California passed Prop 64 in 2016, I knew I had to take that set of skills doing policy and advocacy and regulatory work, and that it could also be applied to cannabis. So there's more I could say, but that's sort of part of the journey.
What a journey. What a journey.
And so I know you said you started at an early age. Can I ask what that age was? Because, I think we all started at a relatively early. Mine was 13, man.
I probably shouldn't say, but I started smoking the summer after 4th grade.
Well, what?
Okay. Yeah. I'm the youngest of 7 boys in my family. And, I remember sitting around one of my brothers. He'd be around all his friends in the park, hippies back in the 70s.
4th grade. How old were you?
10 years old.
What?
That's right.
Wow.
Caught my brother would be sitting his friends or smoking weed. I caught a little contact one day. And then my brother said, hey, you know what? I'm going to get you high tomorrow. So that's when I first started. Then I did take a year off, I think, 5th or 6th grade.
Yeah. And
then I continued it then on, till now.
Well, it's funny that we're talking about this because tonight, this whole night is kind of like a down memory lane because tonight I'm going to have my mom on the late night show. So you guys want to make sure you tune into the late night show. But like she sent me, I'll just give you a slight hint of what happened. She sent me a picture 2 weeks ago, and they were a couple of bowls that I had a long time ago. And she must have confiscated them from me, but she didn't get rid of them. She saved them. And they are intact. I have not seen them in person, but they're here in the studio tonight. They're not unwrapped. We're going to see what's in them. We're going to see the whole thing. It's going to be good.
Can't wait to see that.
And my mom's going to come on and explain why she even took it to begin with.
Okay.
So anyway, so Jane, back to it's a trip down memory lane. So yeah, what was your starting age?
I was a little older than you guys. I was 15. I just turned 15.
All right,
that's a better age.
Yeah,
yeah.
I think so. Yeah. It's interesting. Right? Yeah. Go ahead.
No. Go. Tell me what's interesting. Because what I think is interesting is that the way you got busted at your prom. Like that's way interesting, man.
And then where it took you.
And then where it took you, because it really it shaped your next step, and then that shaped the next step. So I like that. That's pretty amazing. That's really fundamental.
Totally. Yeah. I think, I had an experience with how, like just the criminalization of cannabis could strip everything away from you, right, really quickly. And again, I was just really lucky to be 17 years old and not 18. And, that meant that I evaded some of the stricter elements of that. And it definitely motivated me to get involved in cannabis advocacy almost immediately afterwards.
Yeah, that was my next question. What came immediately after that in terms of the advocacy?
Yeah,
What did you do? What was your first? You said something about Airbnb. Was that your first?
No, that was the job that I had before cannabis. But when I was in college, I joined something called the Public Defender's Office. So UC Berkeley has an office called the Student Advocate's Office, also known as the Public Defender's Office. And they're essentially a public defender for students, right? So when students are charged with some sort of offense by the university, this is the office that defends those students. And the work that I did was focusing on cannabis cases. Because, what I noticed is, again, even a small amount of cannabis could lead to people getting their financial aid revoked. And even in a privileged university setting like Berkeley, I would notice that there was real disparate kind of enforcement of these cannabis laws, right? That, in certain places like fraternities that the cops didn't really penetrate, you could use cannabis more safely. But if you were sort of in the wrong part of the city, then those laws could be applied much more harshly or, to certain student populations. So,
Well, I mean, listen, Todd and I'm not sure. Yeah, so I was just going to say, Hirsh, Todd and I went to Temple. I had a situation where I was at Temple and I had, I guess, an infraction, and I had to go in front of the
J board.
J board, that's right. And there were no advocates for me. I was my only advocate, and I took a strategy that what they smelled wasn't cannabis, but indeed a clove cigarette. And I went on I literally, I think they were shocked by it, but I literally, in the middle of my presentation, I lit up a clove cigarette during my J board hearing, and I said, "This is what you smelled. You did not smell cannabis coming from my room." And I guess it was okay to smoke then.
I was going to ask that question. How'd that go over?
It's a long time ago. I guess it was okay to smoke, man.
Yeah. Well, I had.
What I like is that California was kind of ahead of it. They a school like UC Berkeley had an advocacy board to help
They're
people
smarter
through
than
these.
us. They were smarter than the Temple students.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's a great concept.
So what type of things did you work on with that? Did you just stick to the cannabis things, or did you just handle all kinds of different things?
It was mostly cannabis work, right? And it would generally be when someone was caught with cannabis at the wrong place and at the wrong time, and it could be. Again, even in a setting like UC Berkeley, it could be really punitive, right? And so it was basically trying to make sure cannabis offense wouldn't derail someone's progress through university. And again, the treatment with alcohol is so disparate, right? Like on these college campuses, of course, it's illegal for a lot of students to drink, and yet massive alcohol overconsumption was sort of tolerated. And so I think that kind of motivated me as well, right, to do that kind of work.
Yeah, I love
Equality.
I love it. And so, I mean, that was your entry into the whole thing. Give us a little bit of a rundown of what came after that, and then we can talk, we can get granular about what's happening in some of these different markets.
Yeah, I think I had that experience, right, in high school, and that motivated me to get involved with advocacy work. And then that led to a lot of education, right? Like I just learned a lot about the war on drugs that, we weren't really taught in high school, right? So I learned a lot about Harry Anslinger, right, for example, right, and the way in which he weaponized cannabis in the 1930s to install cannabis prohibition. Again, I didn't learn any of that in high school, but once you experience the criminal justice system in cannabis, you start to do your research, and so you learn how it was essentially black men and white women hanging out in jazz clubs in Harlem in the 1920s during the Harlem Renaissance that really upset a lot of white American society, right? And how the Mexican American Revolution and how immigrants from Mexico and the association with cannabis led to cannabis criminalization. So I would say, Phil, that was a big piece of it, right? Over years, my eyes were really opened up to that. I started to, read much more about Nixon, right, and Reagan and the installation of the modern drug war. One of the great books that I read during this time was The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
And she, does a really good job of chronicling how, our system of mass incarceration in this country really got set up after the civil rights movement, right? And so she sort of traces, how in 1968, Richard Nixon utilized a Southern strategy to win the presidential election, declared a modern war on drugs, and the way in which the U.S. prison population just exploded after that. So I think that's part of the answer to your question, Phil, is like I got acquainted with a lot of those parts of American history and where cannabis prohibition came from. And I was also able just to connect it to my own life. As I mentioned, my parents are immigrants from India, and India has long had a robust, 1,000-year tradition with cannabis. And yet when the U.S. adopted its policy of prohibition, it kind of exported that over to India. So that one piece of it was education.
Not only that, Hirsh, but it permeated the world really at that point, did it not? I mean, at that point, what we did here and this messaging that came from us really permeated the entire scope across the world.
Totally. I mean, no, I think that's absolutely 100% true, Phil. And it's a testament to how the U.S. kind of sets the global agenda on drug policy. And like you said, it just exported that policy of prohibition across the world. I think one exciting thing, and I'm sure we'll get to this, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this too, is that now the U.S. has the opportunity to reshape the rest of the world. If we lead and declare that cannabis has medical utility, that can make the rest of the world much more comfortable with it. And I'm sure you guys have thoughts on that too, and we can kind of break that down. I think that's what's so exciting about this becoming global. But
listen, if you're the one who broke it, then yes, we should have great influence in terms of being able to fix it. That's how I see it. And there's no doubt. And I would love, and this is obviously not for tonight, Hirsh, but I'd love to do another show where we go back and we dig the history. I'd love to see if we can literally pinpoint maybe even a specific moment. I mean, one of the things we're going to do tonight is we have one of our gigs is we have a top 10 hit weed moments in history. But that's not even what I'm talking about now. What I'm talking about now is the possibility of just breaking down the history, maybe having a few expert panelists on where we can just figure out exactly where things kind of went down the wrong road. Because I find this extremely interesting to see how probably a very, very small group of people had such an influence over so many others for so long.
Well, the oil industry, suppressing alternative fuel is kind of parallel to this, right? Suppressing the marijuana and get the alcohol sales and all of that, the prohibition thing. And I think that's part of it. So there's a big bias, and that's part of the struggle now. Things are becoming legal, but we're still not getting the same treatment as people on prescription drugs.
But we all become aware of the fact that we're being lied to and have been lied to, and it's not just about cannabis. It's about food and dyes in your food. We've been lied about sugar and pre-diabetes. We've been lied to about fucking everything.
This is true.
So it doesn't surprise me that this is what they've lied about, but the influence of it and being able to change the face of something that's so beneficial to people, it's really mind-boggling to me. And I keep looking around the studio, Hirsh, and we've got all the propaganda, the Devil's Harvest, Reefer Madness. But that was really that was where the rubber met the road during those years, where the messaging and the propaganda was so strong and so consistent. I mean, assassin of youth.
For the broad-minded adults only. Now you're risque and everything else because you smoked a little weed.
It's incredible. It really is incredible. So,
totally. And there's so much history there. You guys should do an episode on it, absolutely. And, there's so many interesting characters in this drama, but I think about someone like Louis Armstrong, for example, right? Celebrated American musician, big fan of cannabis, right? But who had to navigate these kind of cross currents. I mean, he's just one example, but there's so many stories embedded in that.
Isn't that crazy? At a time where he had to navigate a whole other bunch of things as well, right?
Insane.
And the weed was relevant. You needed it.
What if, listen, these guys
stress relief.
They're fighting for weed. They're fighting for their lives and the right to exist. Think about it. So how important could weed be if you're fighting for your life and you still have a breath left to speak well of cannabis? What's that mean?
Yeah.
Good example. Thank you, Hirsh.
Totally.
We appreciate that. So, Yeah. So is there anything, anything on your way to where you are today that you want to kind of mention to us? I don't want to skip over anything, but I certainly want to make sure you have the platform to tell us everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say a couple of things. One, like I mentioned, I went to law school and I don't really practice law anymore, but I bring that up because I think if you're a legal nerd and a regulatory nerd, cannabis is one of the most fascinating industries to get involved with. It touches on so many interesting constitutional issues, the relationship between the federal government and state government and local government, right? Like we're now sort of updating all of the elements of our law, whether it's bankruptcy law or tort law or property law, to apply to cannabis. So not to make this kind of like a legal seminar, but I think that's a big, in addition to my love for cannabis, I think that's a big reason that I do the work that I do, because legally, it's incredibly interesting. And the other thing that I'll just say, as I mentioned before, before I worked in cannabis, I worked in tech policy at Airbnb. And I had the experience at that company of seeing this new economy develop and it's spreading across the world, and how it would be regulated slightly differently in different parts of the country and different parts of the world. And that's sort of what I feel like what we're all experiencing right now.
Yep.
Right? Cannabis city, each country is sort of adopting its own approach to how it wants to regulate this plant. And I think that's incredibly fascinating. And you can learn a lot about those countries just from looking at these different experiments around the world.
It's fascinating. It really is, and the correlation that he gave, the example, is really good because we're talking about industries in their infancy. So, and the things that you see, and if people have been watching this, they see that we had Johnny B on. He's the founder of No Goo Nonstick, and he's one of the big reasons that we're even doing any of this stuff, because it was a lot of his influence and his taking me on some of these things. But one of the things that I saw, Hirsh, and I don't know if you caught this or not, but I went to a dinner. It was one of those dinners where a lot of different groups all got together and got a big old table and sat down. And it was during a champ show, and it was in the evening of a champ show. And I just they invited me, and I was absolutely, I would go. And we're sitting there, and I'm just watching these sub factions of the table all talking to each other. And before, maybe halfway through, these guys are writing up a deal on a napkin at the restaurant to sell a publication, which I won't say which one at the time, but that's crazy. And I'm thinking to myself, when's the last time I saw that? Never. And so it just honed me in on the fact that this is such an infancy, that what you would see in some industries back in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, some of those same characteristics about one-on-one bonding and elements and being able to do a deal without thousands of fucking lawyers, we could see that. And so to me, that was extremely fascinating and drove my interest in wanting to continue, down this road and be a valuable provider of something in this space. So,
hey, the wellness brings people together, like-minded.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty cool, man. That's pretty cool. So I'll tell you what. Let's knock our commercial out of the way real quick, and then when we come back, what we can do is we can talk to you about Pennsylvania. We can talk about Utah. I think we should probably talk about Texas. We're going to talk about Texas later on tonight as well, but we'll touch on it a little bit. And I know that you've got some things that we can talk about in terms of what's happening in Europe. So, sound good? Yeah.
Sounds great.
All right,
Sounds
cool.
great.
All right, guys, we'll be back right after this.
So many dispensaries have resorted to a bland, impersonal shopping experience, where you often don't even get to see a sample of the cannabis you're planning on purchasing before you buy it. If you're looking for that extra personal touch, come check out High Roller Dispensary in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Our staff are avid cannabis connoisseurs who are sure to help you find the strains that fit you best. Whether you're looking for premium flower, edibles, concentrates, or tinctures, we have you covered with over 100 different strains to choose from, all of which are able to be seen, smelled, and thoroughly examined in our elegant showroom. If you're in a rush, we offer a seamless online ordering system that allows for in-depth exploration of all that we have to offer. So whether you're a novice or a seasoned stoner, be sure to stop by High Roller Dispensary and we'll make sure you're floating on Cloud 9 by the time you leave.
Marijuana is huge.
Hey, I'm OG Ganja Goddess, and you're watching Cough Country TV. Peace.
This is Chef Marvin Jane, and you're watching Cough Country TV, live from New York.
Right around here, 15 inches, maybe if you're younger, you go up to 19 inches, you know?
Yeah, you know, you already went the big age.
Sometimes a CIO might make commitments to a CEO that they just can't fulfill. And it's very hard to succeed in those environments. You really want to be able to set the expectation right up front.
How would you feel with no sex, no weed for a month or two? I'm going to be really angry.
I feel sorry for Jake.
Yeah, Jake's going to get fucked up.
Wow, this is Phil. Yeah, for this is all you. This is the Cough Country OG pink hoodie.
In terms of marijuana, I think it should happen.
Right, we're back. What's going on? Guys, we are here with Hirsh Jain. He is the founder of Ananda Strategy. And if you're just tuning in now, what you missed was his background and how he got into this whole thing and how cannabis has influenced his life. And I've already learned something.
Very interesting.
Very interesting. So, Hirsh, we appreciate it so far. So I guess the way, let's start with Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania is how you and I connected, right? And so we've seen bills come and go, right? We've seen some bills come and go. I guess my first question, just because it's so fucking outrageous, is what was your thoughts on Pennsylvania thinking about using their alcohol state store and states and alcohol regulatory bodies to oversee cannabis? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm excited to talk about this. And on all these things, I want to hear what you guys think too, you know, being the Pennsylvanians, but, you know, I'll give you my take.
Sure.
On the state store model, you know, I think it was unfortunate. It's obvious that when the House passed that state store model, they really alienated the Senate Republicans. I think that's why the Senate Republicans didn't even attempt to modify that bill. And we're going to need cooperation to get a bill passed. So just tactically, right, it seemed to have alienated some folks. And then just substantively, and I'm just going to say here the same thing that I think many people have said before, that model just really isn't workable. You know, cannabis is still federally illegal. A state store model would basically make the state of Pennsylvania kind of complicit in doing something that is federally illegal, and would involve all sorts of legal and banking complications. And I would also say if one of the goals of cannabis legalization is to restore communities that were negatively impacted by cannabis prohibition, handing over that business to the state doesn't really make sense. That doesn't really serve those goals. And I mean, last thing I'll just say is that's my opinion, but you could just look at the polls of Pennsylvanians, right? And I think like 70% of people disapproved of the state store
75.
model. So no matter what I think.
Yeah, it's an easy call for Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean, for every reason. Absolutely. For every reason you said, it doesn't restore any trust. It doesn't give back anything to the community. And additionally, the folks that work at these stores are not knowledgeable whatsoever about cannabis. The stores themselves, I mean, if you want to talk about a stripped down, unglamorous, undecorated store, go to a Pennsylvania state store. It's shit is blank as
bland.
The only thing you see is somebody who might pay for a floor stand for a promotion. Listen, I don't even think the state should be selling alcohol, let alone weed. So I'm thankful. I'm honestly thankful that that didn't go through. I think that they alienated all Republicans. I think Republicans made it clear that was a line in the sand that they're not going to cross. But thankfully, it got knocked down. Listen, anything that in Pennsylvania from this point forward, I think we can comfortably say will go through the dispensaries, the existing dispensary system that we have. Hopefully
hopefully they go that way.
And hopefully it gets expanded.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Well, what I'm, my question is, you're pretty astute to what's going on in Pennsylvania and trying to get this adult use through. And it's always stalled. You got the people writing new laws and they're always getting rejected. What is the main sticking factor? I mean, what can we do to push it through?
Totally. And Todd, I'll answer your question, but I got to be careful. I could talk about Pennsylvania for an hour, so you'll have to stop me. Hopefully I won't go on that long. But I mean, let me just a couple things I want to say off the bat, right? I think people in Pennsylvania don't realize how important Pennsylvania passing would be to the national movement, right? If Pennsylvania passes, it would be the 25th adult use state. It would get us closer, right, to a tipping point where a majority of states have adult use cannabis. It's also a huge state, right? So it would really matter in terms of the percentage of people that live under an adult use state. And if Pennsylvania were to pass, it would show that Democrats and Republicans can come together to legalize cannabis in a state, which has never happened before, right? It's always only happened through a ballot initiative, right? Or happened through because one party hasn't the entire control. So I would hope that people in Pennsylvania who are working on this issue understand how, if you believe in cannabis nationally, getting Pennsylvania across the finish line is huge, right? And that's why it's so important to so many of us across the country. So that's one thing I want to say. The other thing I want to say is I know Pennsylvania knows that it's surrounded by states with adult use, but these states are really growing right now. Like the big growth states in U.S. cannabis right now are the ones that are bordering Pennsylvania, in part because they're deriving a lot of revenue from Pennsylvanians. Like New York is the fastest growing market right now in the country. And that's because a lot of those stores that are right over the border, for example, right? Ohio is opening up new stores, growing its market. New Jersey, right? It's growing its market. I know Ohio and New Jersey and New York have been online for a year or two, but now they're really starting to ramp up and really capturing that revenue. And one other thing I want to say, Delaware is going to start its sales probably at the end of the summer. So at a certain point, the amount of money that is bleeding outside of the state just becomes really, really significant. So I hope people in Pennsylvania know that's where all the growth is happening.
Well, we're the Quaker state, man. We like to stay old.
And Hirsh and I were talking earlier today, and one of the things we were talking about, I said, these guys, they're so desperate to advertise that the billboards all around Philadelphia are all for dispensaries that are from mainly New Jersey, but they're out of state, and they literally go as far on the billboard to tell you, hey, come on over across the bridge, grab what you need, and go home. They literally fucking say that, and it's like illegal. And so, Pennsylvania is such that prime market that, A, we shouldn't be in this position where we're not recreational legal. By not being recreational legal, you're setting up our population for a lot of legal downfalls. Because I would have to imagine, we can get some cops on here, but I would have to imagine there's been plenty of people pulled over going from New Jersey into PA with New Jersey weed.
And that's the point of legalizing. So to cut down on the criminalization.
For all of those reasons.
So we just don't get it.
From tax dollars to social equity to all of these reasons that this should be done.
Well, listen, how many years have people been going to New Jersey to get alcohol because it's a lot cheaper? So, hey, if Pennsylvania doesn't want to be in line and be competitive, people are going to go across state lines.
Yeah. And that's what they're doing.
Speaking of New Jersey, I remember when the Eagles were in the Super Bowl last year, I saw a bunch of New Jersey dispensaries sponsoring events at bars in Philly, right? And I was like, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Like you have a bunch of New Jersey dispensaries that are sponsoring these events in Philly that are Eagles events. It's hilarious.
So the whole saying of missing the boat. This is missing the boat right here,
if
man.
If Delaware comes through before PA, that's not looking good.
Fuck, man. And they are going to come through before. And they are.
Yeah.
And they are.
Yeah. they're at their final stages of just launching their program. So,
and it's keeping the underground salesmen in business.
Right.
So,
I don't want to go too deep into PA, but home grow was something that we've talked a lot about, and we think it's, and a lot of other people think that that's one of the most important things to do if you're going to have if you really want to make it legal. You got to have home grow. I know this bill doesn't have home grow. My friend Paul Friel, who's been on the show, he's not a part of the legislation, but in the conversation he's had, he's like, maybe I'll put an amendment together. I'm like, you put an amendment together, you'd be like a freaking hero, I think, in Pennsylvania. But all they get from the governor is a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk about how he wants it, but he's doing very little, if anything, behind the scenes to actually direct, lead, and make it happen. And he's got these national aspirations, and it would.
Is that part of it?
Is it?
Maybe. He's putting his own self ahead of, Pennsylvania.
Well, and who's not going to be a pussy and break the barrier and step up? I thought that,
Hey, someone needs to.
I thought the Dems were okay with this.
Well, the Dems are okay with it. The main sticking point is it wants to go through, but the Republicans kill everything. So, it's got to be both sides of the, aisle working together, so hopefully we'll get there.
I guess your quick thoughts on home grow?
Yeah, look, on home grow one, right? If you believe that cannabis is medicine, then everyone should have the right to grow it. So just like philosophically on principle, right? I think it's hard to argue with, right? Like that it's a right that people should have, number one. Number two, I don't even think home grow is a threat to the profits of big cannabis companies, right? Home grow, if anything, familiarizes and builds comfort with cannabis, right?
Exactly.
So just the idea that this is,
home brew didn't kill alcohol.
Right, how about that?
Here's what people want. They want to be able to say they can do it. And when you tell someone they can do it, probably 9 times out of 10, they won't do it. What are they going to get? A starter kit, like a home brewing kit, and you get a weed kit, and then they'll do the same thing with that they did with the beer kit. Is that it'll sit
right, be in a closet.
They might try it once or something, and then that's the end of that.
Right. It takes work,
Everything.
It's not easy. It's time, dedication.
Anything worth anything takes time and effort in things. Yeah.
And it's a cost too.
And what I would just say about Governor Shapiro is this is now an overwhelmingly popular issue in this country. Governor Shapiro has the opportunity to say that he was there to bring Democrats and Republicans together to pass a cannabis legalization bill, an issue that is broadly popular in this country. Again, this has generally happened because of ballot initiatives like in New Jersey. And so this should be a feather in his cap as he is running for re-election and probably for the presidency in 3 years, and so he needs to roll up his sleeves and get it done. It's in his.
Let's get in his ear. Let's get in his
ear.
Well,
we've already had a full conversation on whether we think that he got high at summer camp. We did talk about that.
Can we get Shapiro on the show?
I'll get an invitation out.
We need to talk to him.
Okay, let's see.
Let's do it.
Let's see.
See if he's smoking fatty with us too.
He's definitely not going to stay for the after show.
We turn the cameras off, see if he light up.
Yeah, he's definitely not going to stay for the after show. For sure. So, let's not let Pennsylvania dominate the things. Why don't, staying domestically, Hirsh, why don't we talk about a few other areas of importance or areas that you think we should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I think you mentioned Utah earlier. I know it's a small state, but maybe we can just touch on it real quickly and why I think it's fascinating. Utah is a great example of how broadly cannabis is in the, popular cannabis is in this country, right? So Utah is obviously dominated, right, by the LDS church, right? Recent polls in Utah show that, a clear majority of Utah residents want to legalize adult use cannabis. Utah has a thriving medical program where more than 3%, there's about 3 million people in Utah, more than 100,000 of them are registered medical cannabis patients. So I know Utah's not California and it's not New York, but in one of the most conservative states in the country, they passed a medical cannabis program where people are opting in by the day. 70% of self-described Mormons approve of medical cannabis in Utah. So, there are states like Utah or Arkansas that you think of as these really conservative states. But if you look at the way cannabis is being adopted in those states, and you look at the way in which these conservative electorates are expressing their support for things, it shows you how much the cannabis issue has moved. So yeah, that's why I think Utah. Yeah.
So ask him questions about Utah, because I had to step out for a second.
Yeah, so that's interesting. But basically, like we were saying, no matter where you're at, what your background is, cannabis is it brings us together. People are for cannabis. So let's let it go. Let's go.
Gotcha.
So what other states do you think are having a lot of problems? I mean, I know Texas and things like that, but what is the worst state you think? Who you think would be the last?
Well, I hate to say it, but the worst state is the state I love. It's my home state of California. I have to say, right, is doing the worst. Now, why do I say that? I mean, California should be the mecca of cannabis, but California, as of today, just decided to raise cannabis taxes even more. California will have one of the highest tax rates for cannabis. So people think about California around the world, right? And they think about a cannabis haven. And look, California has done a lot to contribute to the progression of cannabis culture around the world. And look, I'm from the Bay Area, from sort of, during the HIV epidemic, right? The way in which cannabis became recognized medically. But today, the California cannabis market has been in decline for about 4 or 5 years now. It has a huge illegal cannabis market that sells untested, unregulated products. So not to be a downer, I love California, but it is not reaching its potential as a state. And just to give you an example, right? California is selling about, it's like a $4.5 billion market. That's just like a little bit ahead of Michigan, which is a state of 10 million people. And California is a state of 40 million people, right? I mean, and that just shows you how much its legal market is underperforming.
I mean, and Michigan's doing the best.
Yeah, you brought up Michigan. Great example. They're medical, recreational. I have a friend that lives out there, and she just loves it. She thinks it's great. Got variety.
I mean, the quality. From what I understand, I haven't been there, but from what I understand, the quality is good. The price, we know the prices are good. We've seen
the prices
that.
are great.
Yeah, we've seen those for sure. I think California kind of they missed the train on this. I mean, California they really had the opportunity to be the mecca.
Agreed.
Of the world, really, when it comes to cannabis and the quality of the cannabis that comes out, or that can come out of California.
You think of California, you think of Humboldt County, weed, good, everything. You're right. It's the mecca. It's what you dream about.
But because they can't, because they chose not to handle things the right way, now they're the number one supplier of the black market pretty much everywhere in the country.
This is true.
Which is nuts, because this is supply, if handled properly, could have just benefited the state. Really, that's how I see it.
Yeah, I see the cultivators are having a very hard time. It is losing money hand over fist. The amount of money it costs to maintain their crops and everything, and then the sales are going down the drain. They're just leaving debt and leaving their farms and getting out of there. They can't pay the debt.
Crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. And
100%.
Sometimes, as Ishka said when we were talking there, sometimes they don't even get a chance to get started. They get beat down for the first couple years so bad, they don't even make it to year 3 to even see anything.
Right. Spending millions with no sales, on our horizon. That's
for a market that's not well thought out and doesn't serve anybody.
All excited already, they're ready to go, but nobody pushed the button.
And listen, I'm not trying to take cheap shots on California. Been to California, it's a beautiful fucking place. But the politics there, and I've said this before, companies have to go make different variants of their products just for California. You know what a pain in the ass that is?
Well, across the board, no matter what it is, California's a pain in the ass.
They got emissions, they got different
regulatory,
different ingredients list, and it's crazy. It's crazy, and they want to be. And from what I understand, like the way it's been explained to me is that they just kind of, they want to be progressive to the point where they set a standard for the rest of the country. If they have better emissions, the idea is that we're going to see that first in California, and we're all going to want better emissions. But I think what people see, I mean, even with not just cars, but even with firearms, with everything, there's such strict regulation that manufacturers have to make separate products for them to be able to even sell to the millions and millions of people who live in California.
Yeah, California is difficult.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there's a point at which these policies become self-defeating, right? Phil, you were just talking about the environment. So California has these really rigorous environmental standards for legal cannabis businesses, but they let these illegal cannabis businesses just proliferate across the state that do a tremendous amount of damage, right, to the environment and all of California's parks and forests. So at a certain point, it becomes a question of what are we doing here, right?
Absolutely.
What are we achieving?
Absolutely. So we're not going to pick on California. Let's travel around. Where else would you want to point our attention to?
Texas.
I think I think Texas is really interesting. Just quickly on New York, I think New York is the most exciting cannabis market going on right now in the U.S. It's where the most of the growth is happening right now, and it's just really simple, right? New York is just a huge economic driver, and it's back at the beginning of last year, there was only about 50 dispensaries in all of New York State, which is insane if you think about it, right? So in January of 2024, today there's about 420 dispensaries across the state, right? So like almost 400 dispensaries have opened in the past year and a half or so, and so the market has grown 4 times in size. Yeah.
So with that, what do you see? Because one of the goals is to have people who have been hurt in the criminal system, giving them an opportunity to have these dispensaries. We know there's a problem across the country. So with that growth, do we see any more of the, smaller people, or is it more of the corporates, having these dispensaries?
Now we're starting to see that. When New York rolled out initially, right, it had a really delayed process for these stores getting open. So a lot of the people that were negatively impacted by the war on drugs were hurt by that, right? Like they had to hold rent on an empty storefront for a really, really long time. Yep. You guys know those delays in business were costly. So I think, an honest person would say when New York rolled out its program initially, it actually hurt a lot of those people it was trying to help. But now, right, those stores that are finally coming online, those stores are overwhelmingly, right, owned and operated by, the term they have in New York is card applicant, CAURD, and that's basically the program for people, right, that were negatively impacted by cannabis criminalization and then received priority license. So
that's great to hear.
What do you know about the illegal shops? Because we've done plenty of stories about not being able to get those under control. I think the last time we reported it, they were on a run shutting these down. So what can you update us with on that?
Yeah, so they have this program in New York called Operation Padlock, where they have shut down about a couple thousand illegal stores over the past year. And I got to tell you guys, when they announced this program, I was really skeptical, right? Because I'm from California, where we have seen hundreds and hundreds of illegal stores proliferate across the state, and we've never been able to manage it. And so I just thought, once you let this problem grow to a certain magnitude, there's no way you're putting the toothpaste back in the tube. That's what if you spend some time in LA, that's what you think. Right. But in New York, for whatever reason, they've been able to shut a lot of these illegal stores down. Right. And has funneled a lot of demand to the legal stores. I think a big thing, you guys, is going to be who the next New York City mayor is. Right. Because Eric Adams adopted this program. We'll see, right, who the next mayor is and what their attitude is towards these illegal stores.
Well, that's good to hear, some positive stories, because it's not everything is negative. So that's good. And hopefully, PA has to catch on at some point. Everyone is, gaining revenue, and we're not. It's really.
I mean, honestly, I read the stories about the amount of revenue these New York stores that are right over the PA border are doing, and if that was more widely publicized, I think that would really motivate the Pennsylvania legislature to pass a legalization bill. That's a lot of those New York stores are making money off of it.
Yeah, and they have to wake up one day.
Yeah.
So, what's your thoughts as it comes to Europe and some of the things that are happening? Because Germany, we've done some stories on Germany. Germany is kind of popping, seem to be leading the way over in Europe. What are your thoughts on Germany?
I think what's happening, I just said New York was, in my opinion, the most exciting thing in the US. I think what's happening in Germany is the most exciting thing happening in the world right now when it comes to cannabis. Now, why do I say that? First, Germany is the biggest economy in Europe, right? Germany's kind of the California of Europe, so it has a lot of influence on what the rest of these European countries do, right? It's 85 million people. And, they adopted a law in April of last year that basically said cannabis is no longer a narcotic, it's a medicine, right? They reclassified cannabis. And so what that means in Germany is that doctors can prescribe cannabis the way they can prescribe any other medicine. And what we've seen over the past 15 months in Germany is just an explosion in the German medical cannabis population, right? So there's now 1 million people in Germany who are registered medical cannabis patients. Again, that's really wild. It's a country of 85 million people, right? And this program just started 15 months ago. They estimate that by the end of this year, you'll have 1.5 million people in Germany that are registered medical cannabis patients, and that Germany is going to have more than €1 billion in cannabis sales this year. So not to throw a bunch of data out at you, but just the growth in the program is insane and shows no signs of stopping. Yeah.
Wow.
One other thing about Germany
that go ahead. Keep going.
Is they have created an international market for cannabis, right? So in Germany, right, because electricity costs are high and labor costs are high, they're importing a lot of their cannabis from Canada, right? And so you're starting to see an international market develop for cannabis for the first time, where these Canadian companies are exporting cannabis to Germany. Most of the cannabis being sold to Germans in Germany is being grown in Canada. And so you're seeing an international supply chain develop for cannabis, which is super exciting and unprecedented.
That is super exciting.
So does that mean there's an opportunity for cultivation in Germany? I'm going to buy 8,000 acres or something.
There absolutely is. And so there's some people out of the country who are trying to import into it, and some people who are trying to set up domestically. And I'll just say, the U.S. is missing out on that, right? Canada has federally legal cannabis, so it can, it's kind of like what you were saying earlier, Phil, right? I mean, those cultivators, right, in Humboldt County, they can't send their cannabis to Germany because cannabis is still federally legal, but Canada can, which is
and we're going to get nowhere until we can start doing such similar activities, to be honest with you. I mean, we're going to go nowhere until that happens.
It's a major commodity.
I mean, listen, if that happens, it's going to let the cream rise to the top. There's going to be a lot of manufacturers that are across the country that are serving their specific states that probably won't make it because they won't have the captive audience that they have today. Or they're going to step up to the plate, start crafting cannabis in such a way that their product and their strains and their methodologies are highly desirable, exportable, and where other countries and other states want them. That's going to be where it's at. And I didn't know that, Hirsh. That's phenomenal news to see that's actually happening. I thought the Germans were growing their own weed. I didn't know that, but that's phenomenal. And frankly, Canada's got good weed.
Well, Canada's always been a supplier to the black market or the U.S. market for years, years and years, and always been considered, great quality weed. So there's nothing new about Canada being on the scene.
Right. So that's I think that's really good news. What are any other areas that you think are of worth us kind of pointing out for everybody?
It's fascinating.
I'll interrupt you after I said that, but you and I had a little brief conversation about Iran, and Iran's obviously well in the news. And I did a little bit of research because I didn't know, and evidently it's highly illegal there and it's highly frowned upon. But then I was watching a documentary where this guy went to, I think it was called Hormuz Island, where there's a place called Red Beach. And there's only a couple of red beaches in the world, but that's one of them. And there was weed everywhere, popping off, dudes walking around, bags, pulling out handfuls and shit like that. I just thought it interesting, and as we were talking earlier, it was just kind of interesting because, what's happening around the world, while it's different, there's so many similarities to it.
Well, totally. I won't be smoking weed in Iran, I can tell you that. Shit. Keep my shit stateside.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I don't think... Listen, they don't want you there either.
This is true.
Okay.
We cool then.
So, all right. So one of the things that I glanced over was Texas, because on the late night show tonight, we're going to get into detail about what's going on in Texas, and we're going to talk about the lieutenant governor and how the lieutenant governor is in complete odds with the governor. And this guy, I got a video of him, Hirsch. This guy really got his butt feelings hurt. You got to see this video. I thought he was going to fucking cry. I swear to God, I thought he was going to cry. So we're going to talk about Texas, because Texas is interesting. And it's not even so much what they did, it's what it signals. And I guess I guess who it's coming from and what it signals is the big story, right? So we're going to talk about that on the late night show. So guys, if you're interested in going a little deeper in the states, we do have a story on Texas. We're going to dive into that. Hirsch, I'll go ahead and give you the last word. We're going to go ahead and we'll give you the last word. We'll thank you for being here. We'll tell everybody how they can get in touch with you if they choose to do that, maybe on X or something like that. But last word for you, and you're welcome to hang out with us on the next show. There's going to be some stuff we can talk about there as well.
That's great. Well, first of all, thank you guys so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. My last word is that, as I was saying before, we're now having a global conversation about cannabis, right? Cannabis is not something that's just in the US or that is in North America. It is spreading all across the globe. And so I think it's more important than ever that as we start to regulate cannabis, we do so in a way that's thoughtful and that builds public support, because the rest of the world is watching, right? So when we implement cannabis legalization in a way that is shoddy, right, or that creates chaos and doesn't have rules, then opponents of cannabis reform use that around the world to try and put the genie back in the bottle. That's what some people are doing in places like Thailand, where it's just proliferated out of control. And so they're saying that's a sign of the chaos that cannabis creates. So I think as we implement this in the US and across the world, the more we can really integrate it into society and build social acceptance, the sooner we'll get to our ultimate goal of liberating the plant.
Wow, that you could
Great.
Said, well said, Hirsch. Extremely well said. People are watching. What we do is going to affect the whole kit and caboodle. I agree with him.
Responsibility.
Absolutely, Hirsch. You have been a phenomenal guest. I could not. We got to have you on again. I hope that your travels bring you to the East Coast at some point in the near future, so we can get you to come right here and sit with us in the studio at the table. You're super informed, and you brought a great deal of information to us, so we really appreciate that. Do you want to give your X handle in case people want to reach out?
Yeah, my X handle is Ananda Strategy. That's ANANDA Strategy. Follow me on X. I post about cannabis policy a lot.
Yep, okay. And it's informative. So guys, make sure you go over to X, check him out there, read his stuff, interact with him. He'll interact back with you. That's how we got to know each other. So, yeah. So Hirsch, we're gonna actually sign off for the minute. We'll be back at 10 o'clock, and we'll be back for the late night show. Want to thank you guys for joining us. We enjoyed being here to talk with Hirsch. Good time, good information.
My man, Hirsch.
My man.
Appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. So we will. All right. Cool. So we will be back in about 30 minutes, guys. 30 minutes ish. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you later. Take care.